You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and joining me on the podcast this week after getting kicked off the Midway's Kentucky Kingdom is Shane Joseph. Shane, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. That's not true, but if I were a few years younger, it might be.
Yeah, I will digress. Shane's getting ready to turn 21, but we're going to kick the podcast off tonight. We're going to talk about this new adult chaperone policy that Kentucky Kingdom has instituted as of last week. The new policy, guests ages 15 and under must be accompanied by an adult chaperone who is at least 21 years of age. If they don't have a chaperone, they have to produce ID saying they're at least 16, and they otherwise won't be allowed in. Each adult can accompany up to 6 guests. The chaperone must be present at the time of entry and remain within the park for the duration. The chaperone does not need to accompany the entire party for the entire time. And I guess employees are exempt, and organized and ticketed group events are exempt from the policy, and because they've got established chaperone policies already. Shane, as I'm a little older than you are. I've got you by about 10 years at this point. And when I saw this come across Twitter last week, I was kind of happy about it, because as a crotchety old 31-year-old individual, I think there is a issue, or there can be an issue with, teens on the Midway dribbling basketballs, just doing what teens do, just yelling sheesh a lot. I don't know. But what are your thoughts on this policy from Kentucky Kingdom?
I'm honestly okay with it. I think, first of all, the main reason behind this is because the people who run the parks don't want the parks to be seen as basically a babysitting service where the parents can just drop off kids there and just kind of let them run around for the day, which I think maybe is more of an issue with like people a little bit younger than this. Like maybe if they cut it off at 13 or something, it would make more sense. But I honestly am okay with it, especially because I don't know the rules in Kentucky, but they're 15-year-olds are probably not old enough to be driving themselves anyway. So that might be an issue with, because the parents are going anyway. So I think that probably is going to be something that could be like a point of contention, would be that the parents already have to drive them. So now they have to go into the park as well. I think that one of the things I think that you just read, it said like they don't have to be accompanied the entire time, which could mean like the parents just drop the kids off and then they just like sit at the restaurant or something all day. And the kids, so, it's not like the kids are being, handcuffed to their parents for the whole day. They can still, it sounds like, go off and do stuff on their own. It's just that the parent has to enter the park with them. So I can see where this could be an inconvenience to younger enthusiasts or just younger guests in general. But in the long run and in terms of safety and all that kind of thing, I think it's overall a positive. But what do you think?
Yeah, I like it. Like I said, I think it is a good move by the park. Obviously, they've got some new ownership with Hershend, and I don't know if this is a company-wide thing. I haven't heard of anything similar at Dollywood or Silver Dollar City. But it provides that, extra layer of assurance from Kentucky Kingdom that they don't have to become, little Billy's babysitter for the afternoon while his parents, drop him off and say, I'll pick you up in 4 hours, have fun on Thunder Run or Roller Skater or anything like that. So I like the policy. I would love to see it kind of rolled out. And this, we are talking about Kentucky Kingdom here, so this might get me canceled. I would like to see it rolled out to more parks. I think it's a good policy, and it was kind of shocking they announced it, but we'll see kind of how it's met. Obviously, you and I were talking. They've got a enthusiast event here coming up in a couple of weeks at Keys to the Kingdom 2. Jefferson, if you're listening, I guess we're still waiting on our invite to be on the influencer panel, but I'm not going to hold my breath, apparently. But I think it's a good move by Kentucky Kingdom, and like I said, I think more parks should have similar rules in place. But now that we're going to get the news out of the way, Shane, recently you actually got to visit one of your local parks for the first time in a while. You visited Lake Compounce the other week, and I guess my first question: how was your trip?
It was great. We actually went on opening day for the park. This is their 175th anniversary, so they're giving away birthday cake at the entrance, which was pretty great. I love a good chunk of icing at 9 a.m. before I get on a bunch of thrill rides. I thought that was great that they were doing that. That was fun. And this year, I'll have the article up by the time this podcast goes up also, but there's a ton of new additions at the park. They've completely revamped their branding and the way the park looks. It has a whole new entrance, which I'm actually a big fan of. I think it looks a lot more streamlined. Some parts of the park, I think, were showing their age with some paint jobs or some of the signage and stuff like that. So what I like that the park has done is they've kept a lot of the classic look, but just updated it so that it's not looking like it's 175 years old, but it's still having the style of that feeling.
Yeah. And for if you're listening and you don't know about Lake Compounce, it's a smaller park. It's located outside of Bristol, Connecticut, or in Bristol, Connecticut. Which, if you're not a theme park fan and you're more of a sports fan, that's also where ESPN is headquartered. Fun fact.
Yep, it's right across the street.
But in the coaster enthusiast community, Lake Compounce, probably its biggest claim to fame is Boulder Dash, their wooden coaster. And Shane, you and I were talking. I know you didn't get to ride it on this trip because it wasn't open. That said, it is consistently ranked towards the top of the Golden Ticket Awards for the best wooden coaster. It's in that top 5 category with the Voyage at Holiday World and the Beast at Kings Island and El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. Does it live up to the hype as someone who's never been to the park? I'm curious.
Yeah, so it definitely lives up to the hype. Like you said, it was closed for the opening weekend, but it is back open now, which is good. But I have ridden it before in the past, and the park does an awesome job of upkeeping it. When we went on the construction tour, they were even retracting some parts of it, making it smoother. And I've heard from people who've ridden it since the park is open. They said it's as good as ever. It's an awesome ride. It's somewhere in my top 10. I think it's like number 8 or something. So it can compete with some really awesome steel coasters and other great wooden coasters. But the thing that really sets it apart is that it's built onto the mountain of the park. It's essentially the very definition of a terrain coaster. The people who were giving us the construction tour of the park told us that pretty much every morning their maintenance and rides upkeep people have to go in there and make sure that no tree branches or anything has fallen onto the tracks because it's so integrated into the woods and it weaves so close to the ground all the way down the mountain. It has a great out and back. There's a bunch of airtime hills. There's a double up that was just redone by Alan Schilke, actually. And that whole thing runs parallel to one of the walkways through a wooded area. So the airtime on this coaster is awesome. It's just rough enough to not be uncomfortable, but give the feeling of a great wooden coaster. And it absolutely earns all of the golden tickets that they have displayed right by the entrance.
Got it. Yeah, I'm looking at pictures right now, and again, I was supposed to go to Lake Compounce last year. I'm looking right now at my my Coasting for Kids individual fundraiser plaque that I got last year. Which, by the way, Coasting for Kids is live now. We've got an article up on the website. Just search Coasting for Kids. It's at 7 parks this year. Great way to support Give Kids the World Village. It's a charity that's near and dear to our hearts. Sidebar aside, didn't get to go. Really bummed because of COVID, and COVID ruined everything last year. But I'm looking at pictures of this now, and it looks like the ideal wooden coaster. It's just winding in and out of the trees and the forests, and I need to get up to Connecticut and ride this.
Yeah, it's really great. And they also have a Skyrocket 2 at the park called Phobia Fear Coaster, which was open. I love those Skyrocket 2s, especially Phobia because you just have the lap bar. It's one of the few where you don't have the over-the-shoulder restraints, which just makes it so much more fun. And something about Phobia, which I really like, which is actually a little bit different than the wooden coasters, is it's consistent all throughout the day. With their two wooden coasters, if you ride it at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, it's a different experience, and can be maybe slower when it's colder or whatever. But Phobia, we rode it multiple times throughout the day, and it gave an excellent ride all of those times. It's just those Skyrocket 2s are great. They pack a little punch in such a small footprint, and the launches are really forceful. The hang time at the JoJo roll at the top is great, especially with just the lap bars. If you let your arms dangle and just have that lap bar holding in, it's a absolutely wild feeling. For just two of their four coasters in the park, you already have two excellent rides in this park's collection.
Yeah, as someone who's ridden a couple of those, the Skyrocket 2s, I've ridden Tigris down at Busch Gardens Tampa and Tempesto at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg. I like them. I think they're really good. They're fun. The versions at the Busch and SeaWorld parks, they have the what they call the comfort collars, which are anything but, in my opinion. But yeah, there's a video we'll link in the show notes of me at Tempesto Media Day, and I'm riding in the fourth row by myself. And I know there's on the at Phobia at Lake Compounce, that's one of the models that has two cars and not three, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, I'm in the fourth row of this Tempesto car, and I'm in there alone. And we go up to the very top after that. You know, we've got the initial launch, the backwards launch, and then launch straight up and then turn around. As we go into that slow roll, you can see me in the video. I grabbed the seat next to me just because I was so... I was like, I'm trying to hold on to something. There's not really anything to hold on to. But those are really fun rides from Premier. Also, they've got Wildcat, which is another wooden coaster. And then they've also got a boomerang. Shane, did you get on those?
I did. I got on both of them. Their boomerang is actually one of the better boomerangs that I've been on. It's probably the smoothest. Either that one or Hershey Parks are pretty good ones. The shoulder restraints, I think, are new, so they're not too overwhelming on the ears or the neck. So I enjoy that part of it too. And then, yep, Wildcat is their wooden coaster, almost 100 years old at this point. I think opened in 1927. And it definitely shows its age. It was retracked recently, and I didn't really give it a favorable review when I rode it without the retracking. And I think that the retracking may have helped in some areas, but not overall. I think that this coaster would be a perfect candidate for that new RMC little family coaster version. I think that would be an awesome addition. But I know they're still doing their best to upkeep Wildcat. They actually just put new tracer lights on it, which is really neat. It wasn't dark enough by the time we left to see them in action, but based on just other coasters I've seen with tracer lights, I think that's a great addition. And the coaster is also right at the park entrance, so it makes a really great like postcard-esque photo when you're coming into the park. There's some yellow paint on it that really makes it pop. So it's a good looking coaster, but I definitely think that, you know, as it nears a century old, you can definitely feel it when you're riding it.
I hear you. I've ridden a couple of older wooden coasters, and you know, save for Jackrabbit at Kennywood, which is by and far one of my favorite wooden coasters, just because of that double down. The older wooden coasters, you can definitely feel it, and I know we're going to touch on Conneaut Lake Park here in a second because we're talking about hidden gem parks, and obviously Lake Compounce certainly falls under that category. But Conneaut Lake Park and the Blue Streak, it was. You want to talk about feeling its age. It was, you could definitely feel it. Anyway, outside of the coasters, what else did you do at Lake Compounce?
So we checked out their new restaurant. It's called Timberjack Chow House, and it's essentially a build your own burger or build your own hot dog place where they bring out the burgers and the hot dogs fresh right from the kitchen. You can see like all the ingredients and everything right there. You can either specify one of the already options that they have, like I think there's a barbecue one and a bacon one that you can pick, or you can make it your own combination of whatever you want on it. There's a bunch of toppings. There's also the option for a veggie burger, which I like that they have that. And then hot dogs, you can customize to put whatever toppings, or they had a few different sauce options too. I think I got the barbecue bacon burger, and I was very impressed with it. It's definitely not typical park food. I've noticed that the few times I've been at Lake Compounce, they actually have some really great food. They have a Pink's hot dog in the park as well, which is nice. But this place is really, it just looks good. Like they redid a lot of stuff inside the building. They've got these lights in there that are like atmospheric lights that flicker and set the mood. It definitely looks like some place that you'd find in Texas or Tennessee or something. And the food was great. The French fries were really great as well. And they also sell the refillable cups in there that were actually not too expensive compared to other parks. So if you're a big soda person, or if you want some sort of collectible souvenir that you can also use in the park, they had those for sale as well. So I thought that the Timberjack Chow House was a great addition to the park.
Got it. Are there any notable flat rides at Lake Compounce?
There's a few fun ones. They have a pirate ship that's good. They have one of those scream and swing rides. I think the SNS builds those. Those are so much fun. They have a great drop tower that's called Downtime, which I think naming it that kind of tempts fate a little bit. But it was not down at all when we were there. So that was actually a good thing. And their water park, we got to see a little bit of as well. It wasn't open, but we did get to. There's a section of the park you can walk down, or you can take the train, and it'll take you right up next to the water park. We got some great construction pictures of Venus Vortex, which is opening in just a few weeks. And it looks great. I really can't wait to ride it. I'm going to try to get down there this summer. It's one of the slides where the rafts go up onto the walls, and it really looks like a Venus flytrap. It looks awesome. The colors are really vibrant, and they have some cool teeth on it too to add to the theming. The maintenance shed they've done over to look like a greenhouse with Venus flytrap plants in the window. So they're definitely putting a lot of effort into it, and I think it's going to pay off, because this is going to be a really awesome addition to the water park.
Perfect. And for those listening, I mean, I know you don't work for Lake Compounce, Shane, but if you were to convince somebody to visit Lake Compounce this summer, what are your main selling points other than what you've told me, or in addition to what you've told me?
Well, I would say the number one selling point is Boulder Dash, from an enthusiast standpoint anyway. But they also, I would say, for as small of a park as it is, they have a good collection of stuff there. They have a shooting dark ride, which I totally forgot that they had. And it's actually a lot of fun. It's really long. I think it's like 5 minutes, which I was not expecting. It's a little like campy on the inside. It's a lot of black lights and cardboard cutouts, but it's trackless, which is crazy because they redid it recently with new cars and brand new targets. The blasters, I think they actually call them boo blasters, which is funny. But the blasters actually are very accurate, which is a problem with some of the older dark rides, but they've updated that. So that's a lot of fun. They have some great flats. Like I mentioned, the Scream and Swing. They have a disco, which is great. They have a lot of rides that are like family oriented as well. I think a lot of parks, specifically smaller parks, has kind of a gap where there's a lot of like kiddie rides and then one or two higher thrill rides. Lake Compounce is great at offering things in between those as well. And their water park looks great. On the construction tour, I think every single slide or pool has been repainted. They're putting so much effort into this rebranding. The new front entrance looks awesome as well. So I think it's, even if you've been to Lake Compounce before, it's going to be like a totally new experience. So I would definitely recommend, if you're in the area, absolutely make a trip out to Lake Compounce.
I love it. And yeah, we talked about Quasi on a very early episode of the podcast. I believe it was you and me, but you had visited Quasi late last fall. And I mean, how far are Quasi and Lake Compounce? They're pretty, you could do them both in a day if you really wanted to, right?
Oh, you definitely could. I don't think they're more than like an hour apart. Like Connecticut's not very big, so you could definitely make a day trip out of it. Quasi, you really just need a quick few rides on Wooden Warrior there, and then they have a few fun flat rides too. But you can knock out Quasi in like an hour. So if you do that, and Quasi is also a pay per ride, so you don't even have to pay when you go into the park. Just get a wristband or get a few tickets to ride Wooden Warrior, and then if you spend the rest of the day at Lake Compounce, that's a pretty fun trip. And Lake Compounce also just rebranded and added some additions to their campground. So if you want to make a weekend out of it, that I think would be a pretty fun long weekend trip.
Got it. Yeah. I'm not a huge camping guy. I know why I get why some people like it, but my idea of roughing it is staying at a hotel with like 2.5 stars on hotels.com or Priceline. But to each their own, I completely get it. But, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, Lake Compound certainly falls into that category of parks that are hidden gems. And kind of in the second half of this episode, I think we're going to talk about some other parks that are, smaller, non-corporate parks, kind of a rarity these days. There are obviously some bigger parks like your Hershey Parks and Kennywood, Holiday World, people have heard of, even if you're not from the Pittsburgh area or the middle of nowhere, Indiana. You've heard of these parks, but there are certainly some other kind of hidden gem parks that, by the nature of being coaster enthusiasts that we're familiar with and we know. And I use the Kennywood example because I went up there in 2019 and I had the choice when I landed at Pittsburgh's airport. I could either drive north and go to Conneaut Lake and Waldameer, or I could go east to, I can't even remember the name of the park right now, but it's where Leap the Dips is, and there's another an Idlewild with Rolo Coaster, which had recently been redone. I chose to drive north, and I want to talk a little bit about Conneaut Lake. Conneaut Lake, it's like you mentioned, Shane, it's one of those parks. It is, you can go, you get a wristband, it's like $10. You don't have to pay an admission otherwise. They've got a very historic roller coaster, which is the Blue Streak. So Blue Streak opened in 1938. It flip-flops between operating and standing but not operating, given the status of the park at any given time. I know Conneaut Lake was purchased at auction this offseason. It did not open in 2020, but they do plan to reopen the park in 2021. Blue Streak, very, very fun roller coaster. It's got the National Amusement Park trains on it. But as I mentioned, it shows its age. I mean, when you're going up the lift hill in what feels like an old bathtub, because that's what those cars remind me of, you feel every creak and groan, and you kind of, it's like the scene in Big Thunder Mountain Railroad where you're going up the hill and the trains kind of jostle from side to side, except it's actually happening because of the give that the track has. But very fun ride. If when Conneaut Park reopens, you need to ride Blue Streak, but it may be tempting to go to the back row. The trick here, and I learned from our buddy Andrew Hyde, best ride on Blue Streak is in the second to back row because it's a seat that's not over an axle, and you get the benefits of the back row airtime without the roughness of sitting over the wheels. So that's my tip on Blue Streak. But also at Conneaut Lake Park, there's this really weird ride called the Devil's Den, and it is one of two remaining roller coasters by, I believe it's the Pretzel Manufacturing Company, and it's classified as a roller coaster depending on where you count your credits. Coaster Count, I believe, counts as a coaster. RCDB doesn't have it, but it's a very kind of just old school, kitschy, haunted house type ride. It's almost like a single rider wild mouse coaster. And you go through the dark and you kind of wind around these tight turbs like you're on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And the way the ride stops is you come out of the indoor area, you go down a hill, and there's not a break except for the ride operator who catches your vehicle. It is the most anti you can't do this anymore ride, but they still let it fly. It's grandfathered in for whatever safety reasons they've got. But Conneaut was such a unique, fun little park. Definitely doable, and like you said, Shane, an hour. But it's got a charm to it that you don't really find in a lot of other amusement parks. Certainly worth going to ride Blue Streak once it opens again. They too have a little water park, which is nice. So be sure to check out Conneaut Lake when they reopen. But also on that stretch of road north of Pittsburgh, you drive all the way up to Lake Erie, and there's Waldameer. And Waldameer, fantastic name, by the way. Coaster enthusiasts know Waldameer for Ravine Flyer 2, which is a gravity group wooden coaster, criminally underrated. Is in my opinion is one of the best roller coasters in the country, and I know it finishes top 10 in the golden tickets or whatever it does, but with the views on the lift hill as you look out onto Lake Erie, it rivals any view you could ever have at Cedar Point. They've got another nice collection of roller coasters other than Ravine Flyer 2, but Ravine Flyer 2, it's everything you want in a gravity group roller coaster. It's got the bank turns, it's got a tunnel, it goes over the road. It is such a fun ride, and that was one of the reasons I decided to drive north, was just to go and ride Ravine Flyer 2. But it's a park that's got some of those classic dark ride haunted houses that are wonderful. It's got an amazing charm to it. And it's also got Comet, which is a Philadelphia toboggan coaster, kind of a family style wooden coaster. Really fun. Definitely think those are two hidden gems, especially if you're going to go to Kennywood and go to that Western Pennsylvania area. Definitely recommend checking those out. And Shane, you and I were talking a little bit, and another park that's kind of up in the Northeast to me is all one region. I know New England and Pennsylvania aren't actually that close, but you were talking about another park up in the Northeast that you think is a hidden gem.
Yeah, I was. That park is Great Escape, which is owned by Six Flags, but isn't called Six Flags Great Escape, I don't believe. I think they just kept the name. And it's a great hidden gem park. I think when a lot of people think of that region, they're just more inclined to go to Great Adventure or Six Flags New England, just because numbers alone, they just have more rides and better rides, I think, in general. But Great Escape is definitely not one to be missed if you're in the area. They have one of my favorite wooden coasters, which is also called Comet, which is pretty old as well, but they upkeep it really well. They have an Arrow Looper, or I should say corkscrew, more like, called Steam and Demon, which I can't speak as highly of, but it is a fun ride. I rode it when they still had the virtual reality, which was a whole different experience. They have a weird, like a smaller version of like a frisbee ride that I haven't seen any ride in this size before. It's called Extreme Supernova, which is great. They have a double drop tower, which is the only like themed drop tower outside of Universal, which I know of. It's themed to like a Bigfoot expedition, which is kind of weird. They have like a Bigfoot like tracking vehicle, which is funny. The ride is called Sasquatch. I think there's some funny like sound effects on it too. For this year, or probably push to next year, they're adding one of, I don't even know what to call it or how to describe it. It's called Outlaw. It's one of those things that looks like the carnival rides, where it's essentially a long pole with two seats on the end, and it spins around and around. They have a flyer, which is great. They have a mine train coaster, which I'm also a fan of. And they also have a bobsled coaster, which you just don't really see that much of anymore. It wasn't really open, like it opened sporadically the time that we were there. So I would make sure that it's open before going. But that's another unique experience. So the thing that really sets Great Escape apart for me is the environment. You would not expect that this is a Six Flags park at all. There's not a lot of advertisements for one thing, but there's also, it was clearly acquired by Six Flags, and Six Flags did not make that much changes, which I'm grateful for, because it was like a storybook park before Six Flags took over. They kept a lot of those elements to it. There's like a whole kids area with a bunch of recreations of storybook stories with like houses, and there's a actual Cinderella castle, which is funny. Definitely not as big as the Disney one, but you can go up to it and take pictures. They have more trees, I think, than any Six Flags parks that I've been to. It's definitely set kind of away from the main road, and you can see a lot of mountains around it. It's not like Lake Compounce, where Comet's a terrain coaster or anything like that, but It really feels like it's its own entity because the Lake George area is very touristy, but this actually surprisingly feels like a break from that. So that's what I really liked about this park is the kind of quaintness of the park, and they have a pretty good collection of rides that'll make for a fun day trip. I think we even spent like a weekend there, and I was never bored over the few days that we were at the park. So they also have a water park. They have a mat racer, which is awesome. After I rode that, I just wanted every park to put one in because it's so much fun. They've got a drop slide there as well. And it's just a really, again, a hidden gem. No one really talks about this park, even when they're talking about Six Flags parks. So if you're looking for something different, more of a small town feel, definitely check out Great Escape.
Shane, I'm glad you kept talking when you called Comet old because it opened in 1994, and if that's old, then that makes me ancient. So
Oh, okay. So
we're not going to worry about
it's
that.
okay. It's older than that. I think they put it in the park in 94, but it was somewhere else since like the 50s or something. So no, I'm not calling anyone in the 90s old, but Comet
Okay,
definitely, yeah. So I did not mean to offend anyone by that. I don't know
okay,
the exact
it's
statistics, but
okay.
I do know that it's older than the 90s.
Okay, yeah, I've looked it up. It was at Crystal Beach in Ontario, Canada. Opened in 1948. I'll retract my comment. It's
Okay.
fine.
All right. So, all right. I knew what I was talking about.
You're you're still banned from Kentucky Kingdom. It's fine. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I think those both the New York Six Flags parks they get lost in the shuffle a little bit. I don't know very much about Darien Lake. The
No, I
only thing
haven't
I
been there. That's
know
a little bit farther for me.
I don't know. The only thing I've talked about is my college roommate is from Buffalo. He's like, "Hey, come visit me and we can go to Darien Lake." And I still haven't done it. Sorry, Jeremy, if you're listening. But I want to do running up against our goal window here. I want to bring up one or two more kind of hidden gem parks, and another one is another small pay-per ride park. And actually, it was Kyle on our team. He was just down in Myrtle Beach, and it jogged my memory of the time I went to Family Kingdom. In Family Kingdom, it is a long time running park down in Myrtle Beach. It is right across from the ocean. They've got a wooden roller coaster there called the Swamp Fox that was it was built in 1966, and then there was a hurricane that came through, and so it was closed for a couple years. It was closed 1990 and 1991, but they rebuilt it. And you want to talk about lift hill views? I mean, as you go up the lift hill, you've got this panoramic view of the Atlantic Ocean ahead of you. Very fun ride. Another PTC Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters wooden coaster, and as Myrtle Beach is, I mean, it's an area that's kind of strapped for land, and there is. I remember I interviewed their general manager several years ago at this point, and we were sitting in his office, which is like underneath, like in the inner workings of the Swamp Fox coaster, and it's all kind of right on top of each other. It's got that Indiana Beach roller coaster tycoon. You don't really know what you're doing with theming vibe, so you just build everything on top of each other because it looks cool. But yeah, they've got another roller coaster, which is Twist and Shout. It came from Magic Springs. It's a pretty standard Wild Mouse coaster. But the thing to me that stands out about Family Kingdom is they've got the first ever Sally Dark Ride shooter. Believe it or not, it's at this little park in Myrtle Beach. It's called the Pistolero Roundup. It is immaculately maintained. And I think for a company that's gotten as big as Sally, who's you know installed dark rides all over the world, especially their interactive dark rides. They're now projecting on screens, so it's no longer the little red dots on the targets. I mean, this Pistol Roundup is a fun time, and Myrtle Beach. It's an area not necessarily known for its coasters. I know we're going to talk Hard Rock Park in a future episode, but Swamp Box is really fun, and kind of that whole seaside parks, unless you're up in like New Jersey or Ocean City, Maryland, they're not a thing very much anymore because the real estate is so valuable. And that's why the pavilion closed in Myrtle Beach, and also kind of why Hard Rock Park closed. I mean, it's just, well, Hard Rock Park opened in a bad economic time. Anyway, another story for another podcast. But, Family Kingdom has kind of stood the test of time a little bit, and looking for thrills in Myrtle Beach, and you've played all the mini golf you want to play and visited all the discount stores, go to Family Kingdom. I mean, you go for a couple hours, you get some tickets. It's all, again, pay per ride. There's no admission cost. You just walk around, ride Swamp Fox, ride Pistol Arrow Roundup. Great time. I can't recommend it enough. They've got a log flume. They've got your traditional carnival eats. And I know as of, this past weekend, they've got some amusement park competition again in Myrtle Beach with the Funplex opening. So we'll see how it works, but they outlasted the Pavilion. They outlasted Hard Rock. They outlasted any other amusement parks that have come through Myrtle Beach. So I think if you're in the area, can't recommend it enough. If even just to get that coaster fix. I mean, obviously Broadway at the Beach has their SBF spinner. The Funplex has their hamster wheel, but you cannot beat a classic wooden roller coaster where you can go up the lift hill and look at the ocean. That's top notch, chef's kiss, all the memes there. Shane, any other parks you want to talk about before we wrap this one up?
No, those are the main ones in my area. I would say Lake Compounce, Quasi, Great Escape, 3 smaller parks that I've really enjoyed. And I like the ones you pointed out too. Those are ones I'm going to add to my list if I go down to that area anytime soon. So there's a lot of parks out there other than the corporate parks. So if you're making a road trip somewhere, look into some of these hidden gem parks, even if they only have 1 or 2 coasters you're interested in. Just the environment's totally different, and it's worth going to if you're planning a trip.
Yeah, and if you're a credit counting nerd like the rest of the enthusiasts are, obviously RCDB is a great resource. You'll be able to find places with one-off coasters like anywhere really with an SBF Visa spinner, like an Incredible Pizza Company or a Family Entertainment Center. Make a full trip of it. I mean, if you're going to go somewhere to a hidden gem, you want to go get as many roller coaster rides in as possible. So I highly recommend checking those out. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster101 podcast. As always, make sure you're subscribed, you're following us on social media at Coaster101, wherever you consume the platform. You're reviewing the podcast on iTunes or wherever else allows you to review podcast. You're telling your friends about the podcast. You're buying our merch at c101.co/shirts. Our TeePublic shop, we're now donating 25% of all merchandise sales to Give Kids the World Village. So it's another easy way to help support Give Kids the World, which we love doing. Coasting for Kids, as I mentioned earlier, sign up for that if it's at a park local to you. If that's Holiday World, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, Six Flags Fiesta, Texas, Six Flags Over Texas, Lake Compounce. Go check that out. Like I said, we've got an article on our website about coasting for kids. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, want to tell us your favorite hidden gem, theme park, amusement park, anywhere in the country, or you want to tell us where to find the SBF spinner closest to you, drop us an email at podcast@coaster101.com. Thanks, as always, to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music. And that'll do it for this week. We'll talk to y'all again soon. See ya.